The moment I pulled out my federal badge, Margaret Peton's eyes rolled back like slot machine reels hitting trip sevens. 1 second, she was standing on my porch, waving a fake invoice for $327.18 in her manicured hand, demanding payment for what she called backdated community integration fees. The next second, she was sprawled across my freshly planted begonias. Her clipboard scattered across the lawn like confetti at the world's most boring party. I calmly closed my wallet, stepped around her unconscious form, and said in a steady voice, "Margaret, trying to extort money from a federal agent under false pretenses is a felony that carries up to 20 years in prison." Her eyelids fluttered, but she stayed down. The begonias would never be the same. Let me back up and explain how I ended up with the self-proclaimed HOA president of Maple Ridge Estates passed out in my flower bed. My name is Nathan Summers, and 3 months ago, I moved into a modest 2-story colonial at the end of Sycamore Lane. The house had been built in 1978, long before the Maple Ridge HOA existed, which meant it was grandfathered out of their jurisdiction. This was not an accident. After 15 years as a special agent with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I had seen enough HOA horror stories to know I wanted nothing to do with them. I specifically chose this house because it sat just outside their legal boundaries, a fact clearly documented in my property deed and confirmed by my real estate attorney before closing. Margaret Peton did not care about legal boundaries. She had been the HOA president for 6 years, during which time she had transformed from a retired dental hygienist into what neighbors whispered was a suburban dictator with a Pinterest addiction and a Napoleon complex. She measured grass height with a ruler she kept holstered to her belt like a weapon. She had once fined the Johnsons $200 because their trash cans were visible from the street for 37 minutes after collection. She referred to herself in HOA meetings as the guardian of property values and had business cards printed with her photo and the tagline, "Excellence through enforcement." The trouble started my second week in the neighborhood. Margaret appeared at my door with what she called a welcome basket, which contained store-brand cookies, a copy of the HOA bylaws printed on pink paper, and an invoice for $75 labeled New Resident Orientation Fee. I politely explained that my property was not part of the HOA. She smiled the kind of smile that made small children cry and said with a syrupy sweet tone that everyone in Maple Ridge was part of the family. I handed back the basket and closed the door. That was my first mistake. I should have known she would escalate. The citations started arriving within days. The first one claimed my mailbox was 4 inches too tall, violating Ordinance 7.3b. The second said my driveway needed to be resealed to match the neighborhood aesthetic standard. The third accused me of excessive dandelion proliferation. Each citation included a fine ranging from $50 to $150. I ignored them all, filing them in a folder I labeled Delusional Correspondence. Meanwhile, I noticed Margaret driving past my house multiple times a day in her white Lexus SUV, slowing down each time to take photos with her phone. By week 3, she had graduated to more creative harassment. I found a letter in my mailbox claiming that, according to newly discovered historical documents, my property line had been incorrectly surveyed and actually fell within HOA boundaries. The letter was supposedly from a law firm called Peton and Associates Legal Solutions. A quick search revealed no such firm existed. She had literally made up a law firm using her own last name. The letterhead was printed on regular paper from Office Depot. I added it to my growing file, which I had renamed Evidence. Things escalated quickly after that. Margaret began telling neighbors I was a problem resident who refused to pay my fair share. She posted on the neighborhood Facebook group that I was single-handedly destroying property values with my non-compliant landscaping. She even started a petition to force grandfathered homes into the HOA, claiming it was for the greater good of the community. The petition got 12 signatures, 11 of which appeared to be in the same handwriting. The real turning point came when she tried to break into my backyard. I had installed security cameras after the 3rd week of harassment, mainly to document her behavior. The footage showed Margaret attempting to climb my fence at 2 o'clock in the morning, apparently trying to photograph what she suspected were non-approved solar lights. She made it halfway over before getting her pants caught on the fence post. She hung there for 43 minutes before managing to tear herself free, leaving a significant piece of her yoga pants behind. She limped away, but not before my motion sensor lights captured her face in perfect clarity. I thought that would be the end of it, but Margaret was nothing if not persistent. She started sending official-looking documents with fake government seals, claiming I owed thousands in back dues and penalties. She created an entire fictional paper trail showing I had attended HOA meetings and voted on assessments. She even photoshopped my signature onto membership agreements. Each document was more elaborate than the last, complete with notary stamps she had apparently purchased online. The fake debt collection notice was her masterpiece of delusion. It arrived via certified mail, printed on thick cream paper with an embossed seal that looked almost real. It claimed I owed $3,247.63 in accumulated fees, fines, and interest. It threatened legal action, property liens, and even foreclosure if I did not pay within 10 days. At the bottom, it bore the signature of Margaret Peton, President and Chief Compliance Officer, Maple Ridge HOA. She had given herself a title that did not exist for an authority she did not have over a property she could not control. This was where Margaret made her fatal error. Mail fraud is a federal crime. Impersonating a government agency is a federal crime. Extortion is a federal crime. And I happen to be a federal agent who specialized in investigating exactly these types of housing-related fraud schemes. I had spent the last 3 months documenting everything, building a case file that would make any prosecutor weep with joy. The security footage, the forged documents, the fake legal threats, all of it painted a picture of a woman who had crossed the line from annoying neighbor to actual criminal. I decided to give Margaret one last chance to back down. I put on my most casual clothes, a faded fishing shirt and cargo shorts, and walked over to her house on a Saturday morning. She answered the door, already holding a clipboard as if she had been waiting for me. Before I could speak, she launched into a rehearsed speech about community standards and the importance of compliance. She handed me yet another invoice, this one for the $327.18 I mentioned earlier, labeled as an expedited processing fee for my overdue account. I let her finish her speech. Then I pulled out my wallet slowly and deliberately. Her eyes lit up, thinking she had finally won. Instead of cash, I pulled out my badge. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Special Agent Nathan Summers, I said in my official voice. Margaret, you are currently under investigation for mail fraud, extortion, forgery, and impersonating a government official. Her face went through several colors, starting with red, moving to purple, and finally settling on a ghostly white. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then her eyes rolled back, her knees buckled, and she collapsed backward into my begonias. I called 911 and waited for the paramedics to arrive. Margaret regained consciousness just as they were loading her onto a stretcher. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak squeak. I leaned in close and said quietly, "The federal investigators will be contacting you within 48 hours. I suggest you get a real lawyer this time." She fainted again. The investigation moved quickly after that. Federal agents searched Margaret's home and found what could only be described as a shrine to HOA power. She had files on every resident in a 5-block radius, including homes that were not even in Maple Ridge. She had been running a shadow HOA empire, collecting fees from confused elderly residents and new homeowners who did not know better. The investigators found bank accounts with over $40,000 in illegally collected funds. She had even registered a business called Peton Property Management Solutions and was issuing herself a salary from the stolen money. The neighbors started coming forward with their own stories. The elderly couple on Oak Street had been paying her $50 a month for 3 years for lawn inspection services that did not exist. The young family on Elm had paid $800 in emergency assessment fees after Margaret convinced them their house color was causing property values to plummet. In total, investigators identified 37 victims and over $60,000 in fraudulent charges collected over 4 years. Margaret was arrested at the next HOA meeting, which she had refused to cancel despite being under federal investigation. The FBI agents waited until she had called the meeting to order before walking in with handcuffs. She stood up, pointed at me sitting in the back row, and shouted that this was all a conspiracy to destroy the integrity of Maple Ridge Estates. The agents read her rights while she ranted about property values and the American dream. Someone recorded the whole thing on their phone, and it went viral within hours. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret had kept meticulous records of her crimes, apparently believing her fictional authority was real. She had even written a manifesto titled, "Maintaining Excellence Through Aggressive Compliance," which the prosecutor read aloud to the jury. Her defense attorney, a real one this time, tried to argue that she had simply been overzealous in her duties. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Margaret Peton was convicted on 14 counts of mail fraud, 6 counts of extortion, and 12 counts of forgery. The judge, clearly frustrated by her complete lack of remorse, sentenced her to 36 months in federal prison and ordered her to pay $92,000 in restitution to her victims. When the sentence was read, Margaret stood up and declared that she did not recognize the authority of the court over HOA matters. The judge added 6 months for contempt.